Okay. Good morning, everyone. Sorry, missed last Wednesday, but was in New York, or in New Jersey, actually, for all the logistics for my daughter's wedding, which was this past Sunday. So unbelievable that the last of my four children is now married, and yeah, so it's one of those life cycle, life moments when now you're at this point in life where all your kids are with somebody else. So um, anyway, and that is a good transition to this week's portion in which Abraham and Sarah in the portion VaYera finally find out that they're going to have a child themselves, as opposed to with a surrogate, which was from last week's portion. So we're on page 99 in the Eitz Chaim, chapter 18 of the book of Genesis, whatever edition of Chumash you're using. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So what I want to do this morning is look at the beginning of the portion, do a deep dive into these verses, and hopefully we'll be able to make it through to all of chapter 18. So that's the first two aliyot of the portion. So let's get right to it, and we'll see why I want to focus on this. VaYera elav Adonai be'elonei mamre, v'hu yoshev petach ha'ohel kechom hayom. So God appeared to him. So clearly, if English writing 101, you never use a pronoun without having first acknowledge who the person is that the pronoun refers to when you're writing. So clearly, the Torah was written before the rabbis divided the portion, the Torah into weekly portions. So we have to remember that at the end of chapter 17, God had appeared to Abraham and commanded Abraham to circumcise himself and then circumcise all the male members of his household. And from that time forward, all 8-day-old boys should be circumcised. Okay, so that's what we left off with at the end of chapter 17. And so 18 just continues. Even chapter divisions are later than when the Torah was written. So God appeared to him, the him being Abraham, in Elonei Mamre. So I'm translating it as Elonei Mamre. The English here says the terebinths of Mamre, but I think it's pretty clear that this is a place, Elonei Mamre, and he, Abraham, is sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Okay, so now we might assume, no, we might not assume anything. One assumption can be that Abraham is recovering from the circumcision that he just inflicted upon himself at the end of chapter 17. Or we can assume that this is much later, at some other time. But the rabbis assume that it is immediately after chapter 17. So this is like the next day, or it could even be that same afternoon that God appears to him. And so then we find in the commentary below the line, based on the Midrash on this, that this is the basis for the important mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick. So God is appearing to Abraham. Why is God appearing to Abraham here? To fulfill the mitzvah of visiting the sick. So if God can visit the sick, how much more so should we as human beings be visiting the sick? Okay, so Bikur Cholim is really an important community mitzvah, one that I'm proud to say that our congregation takes seriously when our Chesed committee checks in on people who have just been in the hospital or are shut-ins at home, and providing meals, providing rides for doctors, to doctors. It's an important part of my job too, visiting people in nursing homes or in hospitals, but it's a mitzvah that actually everyone should be fulfilling. And in fact, according to the Shulchan Aruch, which is the main Jewish law code, a summary of Jewish law, edited about 500 years ago, there in a section on Bikur Cholim, according to the tradition of 500 years ago, after Shul on Shabbat was the time for people, after leaving synagogue, going to visit people who are ill. And I would assume the reason for that is that whoever you didn't see in Shul on Shabbat must be because they might be ill, and you want to go and check on them to make sure they're okay. So Shabbat after Shul was a time when people, 500 years ago, everybody lived. There's no such thing as suburbs. 500 years ago, everybody lived in close quarters, and so everybody knew each other. So, but it's all based on this verse here. God appearing to Abraham, as the rabbis assume, it's right after he circumcised himself. So the institution of Bikur Cholim. And we'll get another mitzvah coming up. Vayisa enav vayar, vehine shlosha anashim nitzavim alav, vayar vayaratz likratam, mipatacha ohel, vayishtachu arza. So he lifted his eyes, and he saw, and there were three men standing before him. He saw them, and he ran towards them from the entrance of his tent, and he bowed to the ground in greeting. Vayishtachu arza. Yes, he bowed to the ground as a greeting. Now, we could understand this in two ways. God appeared to Abraham, perhaps, according to verse 2, in the form of three men. Or God appeared to Abraham, and then Abraham lifted up his eyes, and he saw three men standing before him. So, if it's the first way, it would make sense God can appear in many forms, and the form in which God is appearing to Abraham are these three men or these three angels. Or, if you look at the commentary below the line, it could be that in the midst of whatever God might be sharing with Abraham in this vision, in appearing before him, Abraham says, "Excuse me, I see three people standing before me." And that's how some rabbis understand it, that actually Abraham is saying, "Excuse me," to God, so that Abraham can take care of welcoming in these three strangers before him. So, hachnasat orchim, welcoming the stranger into our home, being hospitable, is another mitzvah that we're learning here in verse 2. So great a mitzvah is it that God is willing to excuse God's self so that Abraham can be hospitable to these guests. So that says something very deep and powerful, that mitzvahs that we learn about are meant to be performed even more so than mitzvahs. So, what I mean by that is mitzvahs that are about how we relate to our fellow human beings are sometimes more important than mitzvahs that relate to our relationship with God. So, for example, if we're in the midst of davening the morning, afternoon, or evening service, and an opportunity arises while we're davening to do something for somebody else, like in this case, perhaps Abraham was davening and God appeared to Abraham, and then these angels appeared, it's okay to stop the mitzvah that involves our relationship with God to take care of the mitzvah of the fellow human being. Okay, so that's something deep and powerful, that community relations sometimes supersede relations with God. And that our relationship with God requires us to ensure that we value our relationship with our fellow human being, so that by being hospitable, we are also reinforcing our relationship with God. Okay, so we can't, the 613 commandments can be divided in a number of ways. One of the ways we divide them is those of the 613 mitzvot, there are those that are our relationship with God, bein adam lamakom, they're called, between a human being and God, and the others are bein adam la'adam, between one person and another person. All of them, all 613, no matter what category they are commandments from God. So when we relate to our fellow human being, like welcoming a stranger in our home, we are fulfilling our relationship with God in the process. Okay? So it might seem as if that Abraham is ignoring God or asking God, excuse me, I have something else to do. Like, how could Abraham do such a thing? That the most important thing to do would be, when you're in relationship or communication with God, nothing should distract you. The lesson here is, yes, we should always be distracted when there's an opportunity to do a mitzvah for a fellow human being. And that actually is not a distraction, but actually a fulfillment of our relationship with God. Okay, so that's the other thing to learn from verse 2. So now, let's go on with the story. VaYomar, and Abraham said to the three angels, Adonai, imna matzati chen be'einecha, al na ta'avor me'al avdecha. My lords, if I have found favor before your eyes, please don't walk away from your servant. So that these angels are approaching, and Abraham, in a very formal way, saying, please stay, don't keep on going. For yukachna ma'at mayim verachatzu raglechem vehisha'anu tachat ha'etz. Take some water and wash your feet and relax under the tree. Right? He's in the terebinths of Mamre, so there are lots of trees around. Rest. It's the heat of the day, so stay under the shade of the tree and relax. Ve'ekcha fat lechem v'sa'adu libchem achar ta'avaru ki al kein avartem al avdechem vayomru kein ta'aseh kasher dibarta. And I'll take some bread, and then you can feast to your desire. Then you can continue on your journey, because then you because you've come by, like the English here is kind of, the translation is helping us deal with the grammar here, because that must be the reason why you've come to me, so that I can take care of you. And they said, yes, we'll do as you have said. Okay, like, in other words, we're gonna stay here. We'll take you up on your offer of washing our feet, relaxing in the shade, and having something to eat. So they don't say thank you, but they say, yes, we'll take you up on your offer. Now, they're angels. They don't have to say thank you, but Abraham doesn't know that they're angels, and they should have said thank you, because they're going to eat. Angels don't have to eat. So if they're going to do that human thing, you would think that they would say thank you, or they'd be as formal as Abraham was formal to them. Okay, 6. Vayemaher Avraham ha'ohela el Sarah, vayomer mahari shlosh se'im kemach lushi va'asi ugot. And Abraham rushed to the tent to Sarah, and he said, hurry up and get 3 seahs of flour, and make 3 cakes. But I'm not sure they're actually cake, like, because he's offering bread. So I think it's some kind of pita or laffa or some kind of bread that you can make quickly. Just mix the flour with the water. I don't know if there are eggs in it, whatever. It doesn't take long to make Middle Eastern bread. So, but he's saying, hurry up and make some bread. Ve'el habakar ratz Avraham, vayikach ben bakar rach vatov, vayitein el hana'ar, vayimaher la'asototo. And then he went to the cattle. Abraham ran to the cattle, and he took a young calf, and he gave it to the servant, to the lad, like assuming there's household attendants who are with Abraham at this time, and that household attendant rushed off and prepared the calf. Now that, I would think, would take a while, because you have to slaughter it, you have to skin it, and then you have to roast it. And roasting a calf, I would imagine, would take a couple hours. But in the meantime, while the barbecue is preparing, they're eating some bread. With verse 8, Vayikach chem'a v'chalav, uven abakar asher asa, Vayitain lifnehem, v'hu omed alehem tachat ha'etz, vayochelu. And this is a classic verse to try to understand how Abraham, the father of the Jewish people, could do this. So he took butter and milk and the calf, which is meat, that he prepared, and he presented it to them, and he stood over them under the tree, and they ate. What's he doing, serving meat and milk together? Okay, now, the easy answer is the Torah wasn't given yet, right? The laws of the Torah that tell us, actually, nowhere in the Torah does it say specifically that we can't eat meat and milk together. 3 times in the Torah, it does say not to boil a kid in its mother's milk. Okay, so if you don't boil a kid in its mother's milk, but you boil a kid in some other milk, it could be okay. And therefore, chicken parmesan or a cheeseburger should be okay. The Torah doesn't specifically say, do not eat meat and milk together. But the rabbis, unfortunately, if you care about such things, the rabbis said, no, we do learn from the Torah that you're not supposed to eat meat and milk together in a meal. You're not supposed to prepare meat in dairy utensils. You're not supposed to prepare dairy in meat utensils. But Abraham didn't know all of that. He hadn't met a rabbi in his life. But the rabbis would say, that's not true. The descendants of Noah actually established the very first rabbinical academy, It was the academy of Shem and Aver, Shem being Noah's son, and we are Semites because of Shem, and we're descended, all humanity is descended from, no, all of Arab and Hebrew humanity is descended from Shem, and then another generation, we meet someone named Aver, and according to the rabbis, Shem and Aver established the rabbinical academy where Abraham learned. And so then, if Abraham learned in the rabbinical academy that you're not supposed to eat meat and milk together, then this wasn't served together. We have to understand that the dairy was served first and then the meat, which we could understand because it takes a lot longer for the calf to have been prepared than for the bread to have been made, and they could have enjoyed bread with butter and some other dairy products, rested a little bit, and then had the main course of barbecued veal. Okay, so however you want to understand it, that's how the rabbis understand verse 8. Verse 9, Vayomru elav, Ayei Sarah ishtecha, Vayomer hine va'ohel. So now they get to the point of what their visit to Abraham is about, that it wasn't a chance, oh, we just happened upon your tent in our journey. This is really why we're here. The angels say to him, where is Sarah, your wife? And he said, Abraham said, here she is in the tent. 10, Vayomer, Shov ashuv elecha ka'et chaya, vehine ven lesara ishtecha, vesara shoma'at petacha ohel, vehu acharav. So he said, now in verse 9, it was they asking for Sarah. Now it's singular, he said, which leads the rabbis to say that these three angels, each one of them had a different task. And one of the angels' tasks was to inform them of the impending birth of Isaac. So that's what's about to happen. So why it says in the singular, if verse 9 said, they said to him, verse 10 should have continued, they said, we will return to you in a year's time. Okay? But it doesn't say it in a plural, it says it in a singular. So which leads the rabbis to say it was the task of one of the angels to speak and inform about this miracle birth that's about to happen. So he said, I will return to you in a year's time, and there will be a son born to Sarah, your wife. And parenthetically, Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. 11. Va'avraham v'Sarah zekenim. I think the parentheses continue. Ba'im ba'yamim, chadal lihiot l'Sarah orach kanashim. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, up in years, and as Sarah had, so we can translate chadal lihiyot l'Sarah orach kanashim would mean that Sarah had gone beyond menopause. Okay, so that's what that means. Had stopped having the periods of women, as it says here in the English, meaning she's beyond menopause. 12. So they're so old, how could it be that this angel is saying you're about to have a child? Ha ha ha. 12. Vatitzchak Sarah bekirba lemor, acharei veloti hayatali edna, va'adoni zakein. So Sarah laughed inside, saying, like she's laughing to herself, saying, after, now that I'm going to have to use the English here, now that I am withered, am I to have enjoyment with my husband so old? Now, whatever she means by that, is she insulting her husband but not herself? Is she saying that she's old and her husband is old too? And there's not an insult. She's just laughing to herself, saying, how are these old people supposed to have a child? But it's just interesting because let's see what verse 13 says. So she's saying this to herself. It says, Bir kirba, inside her, to herself. 13, Vayomer Adonai el Avram. Now here's God again. God we haven't heard from God since the first verse. God appeared to Abraham, and then these three angels appear. So that's why I'm suggesting that God was in a different form as the angels, and now God is God. Vayomer Adonai el Avraham, Lama zet tzachaka Sarah lemor ha'af umnam eled va'ani zakanti. So God says to Abraham, saying, why was Sarah laughing, saying, will I really give birth when I am so old? Now, what does God omit here? God omits that Sarah said, and Abraham is so old. God tells Abraham what Sarah says, but leaves out what Sarah said about Abraham. God only shared what Sarah said about herself, that she's old, right? Verse 12, Va'adoni zakein, and my Lord, if I want to be more egalitarian and less sexist, could say my husband is old. Okay, but this by my Lord is old refers to the place of women, wives in ancient society, that the husband is the Lord and the wife is subservient to the Lord. But whatever, she's still referring to him in her laughing about them being old. And God only tells Abraham that Sarah was laughing about her being old, which leads to another comment by the rabbi saying, we have the mitzvah of shalom bayit, peace in the house, that sometimes a white lie or not saying everything is the right way to go to ensure peace in the home. Because if God had shared that Sarah was laughing about him being old, Abraham might have been upset and might have lashed out at Sarah, saying, who are you to call me old, you old lady, or whatever he could have said, right? So God, to make sure there's peace in the house, leaves something out from what Sarah said. God didn't lie. God just did not relate everything that Sarah said to herself. So shalom bayit, if God can do this, how much more so the rabbi saying we should do this in our relations, like being diplomatic. It's not just professional diplomats who know what to say and how to say it, but it's we in our relations with other people should be always aware of what we say and what we share in order to maintain peace in the home. Okay, we're not lying, but we don't have to reveal everything. 14, Hayipale me Adonai davar lamoed ashuv elecha ka'et chaya ulasara vein. Is anything beyond God's wonder? In a year's time, I'll return, and Sarah will have a son. Right? So God is reinforcing what the angels are saying, that in a year's time, Sarah is going to give birth. And verse 15, Vatechachesh Sarah lemor lo tzachakti ki yareya vayomer lo ki tzachakt. Sarah lied, saying, I didn't laugh, for she was frightened. But God replied, you did laugh. So now, which only means then that Sarah heard God speaking to Abraham, and Sarah denied laughing, right? Because she was laughing to herself. How could God hear? God is above. God's not inside. So this is teaching us, no, God is inside us too, and God hears and sees everything that is on the outside and also on the inside. So why does Sarah lie about laughing? Because she's afraid, and God is just trying to he's not punishing Sarah for laughing, just trying to get her to admit, no, just teaching her, I know you laughed, don't deny it. And teaching her that she has to be careful because God is everywhere, even inside us. Okay, so that's part one of the portion VaYera, the appearance of the angels, and the lessons we learn from the appearance of the angels, and especially the miracle birth that is announced, and also relations between Abraham and Sarah, which also foreshadow for us relations between Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Ishmael, and Jacob, Rachel, Leah, and Jacob and Rachel and Leah's 13 children too, right? So how Abraham and Sarah are talking to each other here, and how God intervenes to maintain peace in the house, how people talk to each other in the Abraham-Sarah family for the next couple of generations sets the stage for that, and how there will be incidents of people sharing things that maybe they shouldn't have shared, like Joseph sharing his dreams and every detail of his dreams with his brothers, and other things like that, all about relationships. So it's just the beautiful part of the Torah is that it's not just about teaching us values, eternal values, but it also teaches us about human, real life human interest, and that the way that Abraham and Sarah talk to each other, and what we learn from that is just as important as other eternal values, like we're about to see, starting with verse 16. Okay? So, 16, page 102. Vayakumu misham ha'anashim, vayashkifu al pnei Sodom, va'Avraham holech imam l'shalcham. So the men arose from there, and they looked out over Sodom, or Sodom, as it's called in English, and Abraham went with them to see them off. Now, there are places in the Judean wilderness that you can look out over the Dead Sea. So in northern Jerusalem, there's a neighborhood called French Hill. Also in southern Jerusalem, in the neighborhood of Talpiot Mizrach, it is on the eastern edge of Jerusalem, these neighborhoods, even though they're north and south of Jerusalem, they're on the eastern edge, and you can, if the light is right and there's no haze, you can see the Dead Sea and you can see Jordan. Okay, so wherever Elonei Mamre is, you can walk from there and look out over the Dead Sea Valley, right? The deepest, lowest place on earth. And you can see the southern Dead Sea where the town of Sodom was. Okay, so it's not unrealistic to do this. Va'adonai Amar, Hamechaseh ani me'Avraham, asher ani oseh. And God said, should I cover up from Abraham that which I am about to do? So Sarah laughed to herself and said something, and now God is talking to God's self. How do we know what God said? It's just an interesting thing to think about. Who was there to hear God's conversation with God's self. It's fascinating to me it just is one of many examples in the Torah that leads me to think that the Torah was written by human beings and not written by God. And this is a way for the editor of the Torah wants us to learn some lessons about God, about humanity, about law, ethics, and values. Just the way that the editor presents this is just fascinating. That somehow we know what God was thinking, and what God was thinking about Abraham. Should I cover up anything from Abraham that I'm about to do? So, 18. Va'avraham hayo yihiyeh legoy gadol va'atzum v'nivrchuvo kol goyei haaretz. Because Abraham is going to be a father of a great nation, a great and mighty nation, and others will be blessed by him. All other nations on earth will be blessed by him. So I promised him and that he would be a great person. So should I cover up anything from this great person? Ki yadativ lama'an 19. Ki yadativ lama'an asher yitzaveh et banav ve'et beito acharav v'shamru derech Adonai la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat Lama'an havi Adonai al Avraham et asher diber alav. For I have known him for the sake that I have that he will. No, ki yadativ. I have known him, but it says here I have singled him out. I have singled him out that he may instruct his children and his household after him, and they will observe the way of God, right? To keep the way of the Lord, which is for us, understanding that this story in the Torah is part of everything else in the Torah, so that the way of the Torah, even though Abraham and Sarah didn't stand at Mount Sinai, they know the way of the Torah, and that they're going to be teaching their children and their household the way of the Torah, to do justice, to do what is just and right, in order that the Lord may bring about for Abraham what God has promised him. So Abraham and his descendants have to follow justice and righteousness, and then God will fulfill God's promise. 20, Vayomer Adonai, Za'akat Sodom. So this is just the background of why God now decides to reveal everything that God is going to do to Abraham, because Abraham's worth it. Vayomer Adonai Za'akat Sodom va'amara ki rabba v'chatatam ki chavda ma'od. God said the cries of Sodom and Gomorrah are great. Just a note here, the Amorah is translated as Gomorrah. If it's pronounced Amorah, why isn't it translated as Amorah? And that's because the name of the town of Gaza in the Bible is Aza. Why isn't it called Aza in English? So the letter Ayin is sometimes transliterated as a hard G, because if we know Jews who are from Arab countries, are descended, like their origin is Arab countries, they pronounce the Ayin gutturally, which, because I'm an Ashkenazi Jew, I never learned how to do that. But it's like something like that, a hard in the back. So it'd be Amorah, something like that. And if it sounds like that, then it sounds like a hard G. So that's why the city of Gaza is called Gaza and not Aza, because it's spelled with an ayin. And it's Gomorrah because the town of Gomorrah is called that because of the ayin here. Okay, so sorry for that tangent. God said that cries of Sodom and Gomorrah are great and their sins are heavy, very heavy, like very, very serious. 21, Eradana ve'er'eh hakitsa'akata haba'a elai asukala ve'imlo eda'a. I will go down to see whether they have acted altogether according to the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will take note. So God is planning to do something about Sodom and Gomorrah, but we don't know yet. 22, Vayifnu misham ha'anashim, vayelchu Sodoma, va'Avraham odenu omed lifnei Adonai. And the men turned aside, and they went to Sodom, and Abraham is still standing before God. Now, we'll know in chapter 19 that two angels appeared to Lot and his family, so which reinforces the message that each angel of the three had its job. So one angel went back to heaven, and the other two went on to Sodom to meet with Lot. But 23, Vayigash Avraham Vayomar, Ha'af tisped tzadikim rasha, and Abraham came forward and said, will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty? So we're supposed to know from verse 21 that God is planning to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. It doesn't say that specifically, but Abraham says it to God here. Why would you sweep away the innocent? Why would you destroy the innocent with the evil or the guilty of Sodom and Gomorrah? And 24, Ulai yesh chamishim tzadikim b'toch ha'ir, ha'af tispeh velo tisa lamakom, lama'an chamishim tzadikim asher b'kirba. Maybe there are 50 righteous people in the city. Will you then wipe out the place and not forgive it for the sake of the innocent 50 who are in it? And we have to do 25 also. Chalila lacha me'asot kadavar hazeh lahamit tzadikim rasha v'haya katzadik karasha chalila lach hashofet kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat. Far be it from you to do such a thing, to bring death upon the innocent as well as the guilty, so that innocent and guilty fare alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? So now I find this to be the most traumatic encounter in the entire Torah. There are encounters between Moses and God on Mount Sinai. Yes, they are dramatic. And the giving of the Ten Commandments there. But this is dramatic because of the ethics that is understood here. How did Abraham have the chutzpah to talk to God, and how did he also have the knowledge or the ethical knowledge to understand that you shouldn't include righteous people when evil people are being punished? Like, who taught him that morality and that level of justice? Right? Where did he learn that from? Now, it's possible he learned it in the Rabbinical Academy of Shem and Aver, but we don't know that. Right? It could be that when God chose Abraham and Sarah and described Abraham as righteous, it's possible that God gave Abraham a crash course on ethics and morality and the values of the Israelite religion that God is teaching to Abraham and Sarah. But we don't know for sure, specifically in what the Torah is teaching us here in the book of Genesis, what those ethics and values are. We're told about the 7 laws of the children of Noah that were given, that were based on the verses that God is promising Noah after he and his family left the ark, and you had the rainbow as the sign. There is, according to the rabbis, among the 7 laws taught then were do not murder, set up a court of justice. But this specifically, this idea that righteous people shouldn't be punished along with evil people, sets the stage for asking the question about the 6 million of the Holocaust, right? This is the question of good and evil that Abraham confronts God with right here, right? How do we explain, like, how are we going to teach other people? If righteous people are going to be included in the blanket destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, then righteous people, other righteous people around can say, what's the point of being righteous? I'm just going to be punished just like everybody else is. So what's the point in being good? And that's the classic age-old dilemma that righteous people deal with, right? Why be good in the world? Why be good in life when in the end we're going to die? Why be good when, you could be hit by a car in the next minute? What's the point? So clearly, human society, civilized society, is based on the idea that there's a certain level of ethics, morality, and justice that society needs to be based upon in order for people to live. Otherwise, there'd be chaos, right? But what Abraham is trying to understand here is this: how to avoid the chaos, right? So God is about to inflict chaos on the world by sweeping up these righteous people along with the evil people of Sodom and Gomorrah. And is this the right thing to do? Is this the message that God wants to teach humanity for posterity? Okay, so that's the question here. It's not just specifically about Sodom and Gomorrah. It's the bigger question of how we understand good people being punished along with evil people. Okay, it doesn't answer, there's no answer for why 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. Okay, it doesn't even answer, you can't acknowledge, it's not good enough that among the 6 million Jews that could have been murderers. Okay, you're not going to pick and choose among all that, look through the whole list and say, okay, this one deserved to be burned in the crematoria in Auschwitz because he was a murderer, right? So it's just the idea of righteous people being annihilated in Sodom and Gomorrah would be similar to the 6 million being killed in the Holocaust. It's unimaginable, Abraham is saying. This is not a morality that will allow, these are not values that will allow us to be able to survive and confront the chaos around us. So I think, the part of me every year wonders why the rabbis did not choose chapter 18 to be read on Rosh Hashanah. Why do we have the story of Isaac? Later in this portion, the end of this portion is what we read on Rosh Hashanah, the birth and growth of Isaac on day 1, and then of Rosh Hashanah, and day 2 is the story of Abraham bringing Isaac to Mount Moriah. That's the story that we read. I think in some ways, the more deeper lesson is found right here in this verse 25, which is a question that we ask at the new year and understanding our relationship to God and how to confront what's in store for us in the coming year. But perhaps the rabbis thought maybe that's just too deep, and those answers there are no answers to those questions. So maybe that's too much to have to deal with on Rosh Hashanah. Maybe we just deal instead and how to confront our faith and what are we willing to sacrifice in the name of our relationship with God. I mean, that's deep too. Um, it's just fascinating stuff that we learn in the story here in VaYera. That is not that we always have to keep in mind what we're reading isn't just history, is not just to be meant to understood as something that happened at that time, but rather read it as an eternal kind of story and the deeper values and lessons that we're supposed to be taking away from it. Okay, we'll stop here for today. Any thoughts or comments or questions before we go?
But
Yes, Bob.
just what?
Oh, Lori, Lori,
First.
go ahead, Lori.
Okay. Yeah, just one question. Is it understood that they're angels just from the context, or was there something that said that they're angels?
That's a good point. I mean, they're called anashim, which means men, literally. They're not called angels. It just seems the rabbis understand them to be angels because they appear suddenly.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's not like it doesn't say Abraham sees them from approaching from a distance. It says here in verse 2, he lifts his eyes and he sees them. So
Mhm.
now he's lifting his eyes. Why is so? In other words, where were his eyes when God appeared to him in verse 1? Were they did so? If it, were his eyes lowered when God appeared to him, and then he lifted his eyes to see the angels, or was he looking straight ahead and saw God and then lifted his eyes and saw the angels? Right. So maybe because of the Vayisa Einav that he lifted his eyes, it's just an unusual way to say that he saw people there. Okay, so since they appeared suddenly, that's why the rabbis
Mm.
refer to them as angels.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, Bob.
You mentioned earlier when you're reading that they wash their feet.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, this is what the Pope does
Uh,
every, and is that the correlation?
well, yes. So it is, and it's what Muslims do too. They wash their
Mhm.
feet after they take off their shoes when entering the prayer room in the mosque.
Okay.
Okay. Now, it used to be a Jewish thing too. Okay. So, well, yes, it used to be a Jewish thing too in the Middle East. So ancient Middle Eastern Jews, it's possible Yemenite Jews do this, but certainly Jews from Arab countries of centuries ago, not today, would at least wash their hands before going into daven, and they might even take off their shoes and do that too. The remnant of this is duchenin, when Kohanim say do the blessing in shul on the holidays. They take off their shoes, and they're supposed to be washing their feet. They don't wash their feet in preparation; they just take off their shoes, but they do wash their hands. So in the temple in Jerusalem, yes, the Kohanim would wash their feet before doing the sacrificial service. So it is a Jewish custom that has gone by the wayside, right? We don't have a water faucet in Sephardic synagogues. Some Sephardic synagogues in Israel, you will find water faucets outside the prayer room, but in Europe and in America, you don't find that in synagogues anymore. It's all becomes cultural changes over the centuries, but originally it was a Jewish thing to do.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep, yep. All right. Have a good rest of the day,
You
everybody.
too.
Take care.
Bye-bye.